All right, let's get right into it. For months, all the attention has been laser-focused on the absolute meat grinder of a battle for Pokrovsk. But while all eyes were there, a different, much quieter crisis has been unfolding on another part of the front line. And honestly, this one could end up having even bigger consequences for the future of the war. This quote from Francis Farrell at the Kyiv Independent just nails it. It really gets to the heart of the matter. While we've all been watching Pokrovsk, the most significant Russian territorial gains this year have actually been happening somewhere else entirely, on a front that's been flying completely under the radar.
So let's talk about this overlooked front. What are we actually looking at? We're talking about the huge, open plains in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, a region known for its history, and one that's seeing a quiet but incredibly dangerous collapse.
And if you want to understand just how immediate this is, get this. On the exact same day that the world saw that dramatic footage of Russian convoys entering Pokrovsk, Ukraine's military made a pretty rare public announcement. They admitted they'd been forced to pull back from their positions around 5 different villages in this southern sector. I mean, just look at the maps here. This shows you the sheer speed of this thing. On the left, you've got a pretty stable front line back in September, but then you look at the right, just 2 months later? Wow. That's a huge shift. In a war where battles can be fought for months over a single trench, and advance this fast is, well, it's seriously alarming.
So you have to ask, why here? Well, this area is historically known as the Dike Pole, which translates to the wild field. And that name tells you everything. It's wide open, sparsely populated, and there are very few large towns or cities that you can use to anchor a strong defensive line. So for that reason, Ukraine, pretty understandably, decided to deprioritize it. But that calculation is now changing, and it's changing fast.
Now, this collapse in the wildfields isn't happening in a vacuum. It's not some random event. To really get why this is happening, we've got to zoom out from the battlefield and look at the bigger picture of geopolitics and logistics. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Ukraine's military is stretched to its absolute breaking point. Why? Because it's being forced to make impossible choices. With U.S. military aid suspended, it has no choice but to pour its best troops and its most valuable drones into the hottest spots, like Pokrovsk. And that, of course, leaves other sectors, like this wild field, dangerously thin. And this is where those big strategic decisions hit the ground hard. When a Ukrainian Marine was asked about the aid cutoff, this was his prediction. It's just a brutal reminder that these high-level political decisions have a direct and often fatal cost for the people on the front lines. Just look at this chart. It really lays out the scale of the problem in stark terms. You can see the absolute peak of U.S. aid that was flowing in during the counteroffensive, but since then, the flow has just dropped off a cliff. And the projections show that by next summer, the delivery of the stuff they need most, the really crucial equipment, could fall to just 12% of what it used to be. Okay, so keep that aid shortage in your mind, and now look at this number. In October, according to Ukraine's own general staff, only 16% of all Russian attacks were happening on this so-called quiet southern front. It wasn't even Moscow's main priority. But, and this is the kicker, that 16% of effort resulted in 69% of all of Russia's territorial gains. That's the payoff for Russia. They're getting this huge, disproportionate amount of success for a minority effort, precisely because the Ukrainian defenses there are so weak from that lack of resources. So how are they doing it? Russia isn't just getting lucky here. They are actively and very smartly exploiting these gaps with a new and really effective strategy. So according to the Institute for the Study of War, Russia is running this methodical, 4-step playbook. It starts way behind the lines, with a months-long air campaign hitting Ukraine's main supply arteries. Once those are weakened, they shift focus. Step 2 is hitting the local supply routes and drone operators closer to the front, basically punching little holes in the immediate defense. That's when Step 3 kicks in. Small infiltration groups go in, find those weak spots, and make them bigger. They're essentially paving the way for the final move, larger assaults that just force Ukrainian units to fall back. So you see, this isn't just about brute force. It's a systematic process. You find a weakness, you make it worse, and then you exploit it. And it's a strategy that is absolutely devastating against an army that just doesn't have the resources to be strong everywhere at once. So you might be thinking, okay, a few villages in a sparsely populated field, why does that really matter so much? Well, it matters because these little tactical gains are starting to create a whole cascade of massive strategic dangers.
For starters, Russian forces are now getting dangerously close to key Ukrainian logistical hubs, like the town of Pokrovsk. They're also getting into a position where they could potentially outflank Ukraine's entire southern defensive line, a line that, until now, has been one of the most stable of the entire war. And maybe the most alarming part? These advances could eventually bring the major city of Zaporizhzhia into the range of those devastating FPV drones.
And that brings us to the biggest, most terrifying element of this whole crumbling front. Because looming over all of this is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Ever since Russia captured it back in 2022, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been this constant ticking time bomb. Russia uses it as a military sanctuary, parking troops and equipment there, because they know Ukraine is terrified to fire back. Meanwhile, inside the plant, the expert Ukrainian staff have been harassed, detained, and even replaced by unqualified Russian personnel. The plant's complex systems are literally degrading from a lack of proper maintenance. And hanging over it all is Russia's threat to restart the plant in the middle of a war zone, a move experts say would massively increase the risk of a catastrophic accident.
And you know, the stakes here are absolutely global. As Daria Dalzikova from the Uri-ISI think tank points out, if Russia gets away with using a nuclear power plant as a military tool, if there are no consequences, it sets a terrifying precedent for any conflict anywhere in the world.
So when you put it all together, what we're seeing in the wild fields is really a perfect storm. You have a political decision made thousands of miles away in Washington that creates a critical resource shortage for Kyiv. And that shortage opens up a vulnerability that an opportunistic Moscow is now exploiting with a new and dangerously effective strategy.
And all of this leaves us with a deeply, deeply unsettling question. Even if Ukraine somehow manages to stabilize this front, what does the future even look like? Can there ever be any kind of real, lasting peace as long as Europe's largest nuclear power plant is being held hostage on an active front line?